Milo, is that you?
There, I think I got it. Bruce?
Which one?
What do you? I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
Because I know you mean me, but I was doing it because we got Kelly as well. We got two Bruces.
We don't have Kelly as well. We don't have Kelly as well. We do not have two Bruces. We have Bruce and we have Kelly.
Back in the day, that's the way it started. Two Bruces.
But back in the day, gas was 39 cents a gallon. What does that have to do with anything today?
I'm feeling what's the word? Reminiscent.
Well,
because
go outside the studio and reminisce, because back in the day, it doesn't matter. I was
listening to the first episode that you ever did.
I'm not yelling at you. I'm yelling at the Mailboy, because he goes, which one? When he knows perfectly well there's only one Bruce and one Kelly. And I was actually before.
So today we have the moderately agitated evil overlord.
No, I'm not moderately agitated. I'm never agitated because I can just turn it off.
Speaking of turning it off, did you manage to remember to push the button?
Ooh, yeah.
So that's why we've been talking for a minute and 14 seconds. I was walking around when I was making myself a cup of tea. I was thinking, I hope Bruce doesn't say, one of these two clowns doesn't say, which one? Because it's been at least 2 years now that we have eliminated one of the Bruces. It's Kelly. Why can't you just be happy you have a showbiz name? It's Kelly and it's Bruce. That's it, man. That's the only way it's ever. That's the way it is now. It doesn't matter what. It doesn't matter that. It doesn't matter that in 1962 I could ride in my dad's car without wearing a seatbelt, standing up with my arms folded across the dashboard. That's got nothing to do with today. Today, everybody wants you to plug in their car. Let's just forget the whole thing.
Okay. Our email address for those who would like that.
That's one L. Oh, God.
This is Barbalet's fault.
Actually, it is, isn't it?
Actually, it is.
This wouldn't have happened without him.
Exactly. True. Really, I mean, if we were to put the blame on anybody, it would be him. I wouldn't be having these discussions. I wouldn't have this massive list of people to interview. I'd just be sitting. All I do.
It's Tom's fault and my fault, because I kept on telling Lionel, "Come on."
Exactly.
Finally said, "All right, shut up. I'll come." And then I was like, I wish I hadn't, because then Tom's trying to get me in an argument with some guy from Australia that I never even fully understood.
That's really true, Lionel. You're a big boy. You're perfectly capable of starting your own argument occasionally.
We haven't introduced you yet, Tom.
I know. I'll mute again.
All right. Him. He's never done this before.
Yeah, exactly. It's his first time.
Just ignore the man behind the green curtain.
So David Letterman, when he started his show on CBS, he had his very first guest was Bill Murray.
There you go.
And
Canadian lad.
And then Bill Murray's not Canadian.
Yes, he is.
No, he's not.
Yes, he is.
From where?
Somewhere in Ontario.
Man, have you been drinking?
Kelly's already efforting.
Yeah, so me too. Bill Murray, Canadian. Man, oh man, are you way off? Are you way off the mark? You're not thinking of Bill Murray. You're thinking of the Conehead guy. You're thinking
David Aykroyd.
He's thinking of Aykroyd.
Oh, I knew I had one of them.
Yeah, Bill Murray was born in Evanston, Illinois in 1950.
So not Canada.
Yeah. No. That's the other thing too. It was we got to talk to Barbalet about is I should have had a different co-host, because it's like,
well, you did have a different one to begin.
I did, yeah. That was
got a couple. You went through a few of them first.
No, I think it was only two. Then Bruce has really been here since the beginning, because I probably talked to him about it. So, anyways. Bill Murray was David Letterman's first guest on his CBS show. Then when he left CBS, Bill Murray was the last guest on the CBS show. Then when he started on NBC, Bill Murray was the first guest on NBC show. And then when he retired, Bill Murray was the last guest. So the very first guest we ever had on this show was none other than Tom Barbalet, who is the founder and creator of Model Rail Radio, our sister podcast, our spin-off podcast.
The spin-off podcast, yes.
Yeah.
So then we had Tom Barbalet for the first show. It was a two-parter. And as a matter of fact, before we went on the air, Kelly was complaining about the audio for that show. Thanks, Kelly.
I wasn't complaining.
You pointed it out. You said
I commented on it because it's. I was reminiscing. So
okay. We'll stop. And then I think show 100, Tom was on that show.
Yes, if I recall correctly. Yes.
Or 150, and then now it's this is episode 200 because we started out originally. All we were going to do was episodes once every 2 weeks. We're going to do an episode once every 2 weeks, and I remember Jason Rice saying to me, "Man, that sounds like an awful lot." And now we do two shows a week every week.
That's an awful lot.
Yeah, that's an awful lot, but it's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
But so anyways, this is episode 200 from the original episodes because we never deviated from that. Twice a month we have an episode, the first Monday and the third Monday, and this is episode 200. And of course, the only person we could possibly have on here is really the person I say. If it hadn't been for him, there would be no Modelers Life podcast. So there you go. So Tom, come on in now. Tom, could you come into the studio, please?
Certainly, Lionel.
Tom, can you come in, please?
Yeah.
Tom Barbalet. Tom Barbalet,
can you come into the
connection with David Letterman? Have we ever done this? I have a fascinating connection with David Letterman.
Do you have a connection with David Letterman?
Yeah.
Okay, go.
What about Bill Murray?
My name is Barbalet, right? But it doesn't mean that we're barbers going back. But my grandfather, my father's father, was a barber. And his kid brother, didn't fight in the Second World War. My grandfather fought in the Second World War, desert rat, drove all the way up from North Africa to Italy. But when he got out, he was a barber in Leeds, and he cut a whole lot of people's hair. And my great uncle, my grandfather's brother, didn't fight in the Second World War. He sunk a boat with a shovel accidentally, and he was a runaway. He was a runaway. Like literally, the family didn't see him through the Second World War, and then he was photographed because he sunk this boat with a shovel, and the family was like, "Oh wow,
Tom,
Bernard's still alive." Anyway,
can I ask a question before you go on?
Certainly.
Sometime in the past 8 years, did you get hit in the head or something?
Oh yeah, no, 2 weeks ago I was in the hospital. Anyway,
I know. All right,
I'm not joking as well. Anyway, so my grandfather's brother's name was Bernard. And he's still alive. He's like 90-something. And he cuts hair. Now, he cut David Letterman's hair. And he lived in LA. He used to do men's salons and then realized the money was in women's salons. But he cut David Letterman's hair in LA in the 80s.
Well, there you go.
Yeah.
Great
guy.
Did he know it was David
with the shovel?
Yeah. Did he know it was David Letterman?
Yeah.
Okay.
So no, my great uncle is a great guy. David Letterman's a piece of. Anyway, we'll move on from that.
Oh, your great uncle was a great guy.
I have a question. Was it his boat that he put a hole in it, or was it?
No, he was a merchant sea person, which was still a thing back in the Second World War, funnily enough. And he accidentally struck a piece. I mean, look, literally, he was a runaway. He was a tearaway. The guy still is quite humorous about his time avoiding the Second World War, but he would have been about 16 at the time. And my grandfather was driving up in his truck, which was called Irene, which is my grandmother's name as well, in the Second World War, but he never fought in the Second World War. He did end up dealing with the Suez Canal and various other things, like he did join the military at some stage. But Bernard's a fascinating man. He lives in New Zealand.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
And he cut David Letterman's hair.
He did.
I'm still wondering how he sunk the boat with a shovel.
Well, let's just say, who knows whether it was intentional or accidental, but he got photographed.
All right.
And then the family was like, there's Bernard.
With a shovel.
Well, yeah.
Shovel, sinking boat.
Sinking boats.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
All right.
It's quite a story.
Wow.
All right.
There you go.
Already.
Right. Yeah. Our email address.
Yeah.
On that bombshell.
You know Bill Murray?
Yeah. So anyways, you take the place of Bill Murray on the Modelers Life show because if you hadn't had your podcast And Bruce hadn't talked me into it, and then I went on, and then you would let me pontificate at great length, and then eventually you wouldn't let me do. I wanted to take over the show, and you wouldn't let me do it, so I left in a huff.
The professor got in the way too. Like I was recounting this to my wife Michelle before getting on the podcast tonight, your podcast, the AML Network. I'm a proud supporter of yours. I mean, I don't give you money, but I certainly welcome anyone who mentions AML on Model Rail Radio. We plug your show at least once a show. So, my view is the more the merrier with regards to model railroading podcasts. So I did want to talk about like the hobby while I'm on here, but I know that's secondary to being on here. So just when you're ready.
It is not secondary to being on here. We just make it more interesting by talking by talking about other stuff. So,
Amen.
So what was it you were talking? You had a story. You were talking to your wife Michelle about the professor. So the professor, for people who don't know, was this unbelievably irritating man that lived in Australia.
He plays a role. It's actually a character he plays. The real professor is totally different to the professor on Model Rail Radio.
Oh, really? Well, if you want to be popular, you should perhaps play a character that's not unbelievably irritating, like a tag. Like a tag in your underwear.
Yeah. Well, we did a show 200, and he called in, and he thoroughly embarrassed himself, and we haven't heard from him ever since.
Oh dear.
Which is kind of sad, but it did involve Terry Terrence, and I did want to talk a little bit about Terry Terrence, and I wanted to talk about Craig Biscaya and a bunch of other folks.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, somebody make notes then, because we don't want to. You can talk about anything you want. I have questions, but so when did you start your podcast, or when did you start
2009.
2009.
Wow. Yeah.
Wow. So 13 years ago.
Something like that. Yeah.
Did they even have internet back then?
Yeah.
Well, they had TalkShoe. You guys were talking about TalkShoe when you came on.
I do remember.
We started with the absolutely crappiest possible audio, but it was based on a show that I'd done previously called Biota Live. So the real origins of Model Rail Radio is this podcast I did for many years called Biota Live, which was about simulating, computer simulation software, as we say now. So Biota, which was the name of the project, the guy who owned Biota decided he wasn't going to do Biota anymore, and then you may remember that there was a president, the last president, not the current fellow, in the US called Donald Trump. Well, anyway, through Donald Trump, and I'm not a supporter, I'm not an agitator, I don't really care about the presidents of the United States these days. I know you're a big fan of JFK, but we'll move on from that.
Who, me?
You. Yeah, we did. We talked about it last time I was on. Anyway,
you
talked about his death.
I was 9.
Well, you talked about his death in a positive light.
Well, sure.
Death in a positive way.
No,
really.
I mean, we're talking about him in a positive light associated with his death, which is very curious. Anyway, so Donald Trump made it very difficult for science, tech, various other charities to operate. I'm not narrating this in any capacity, but anyway, the fellow who used to run Biota canned it a few years ago. So biotacast.org is my remembrance associated with all the old Biota podcasts, and I still record them occasionally. I get pretty pissed off about it, but I still record them occasionally. Yeah, I get pissed off, I know.
Well, you seem like an angry man.
I am. These days, after I hit my head and went into the hospital, I'm a very angry man.
So what happened? Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, so this podcast, so let me give a little bit of background.
Yeah.
About a month ago, I sent a message to Tom. I says, hey, there's episode 200's coming up. What do you want to be on it? And we'll do and he says, well, I can't possibly be on it this day. I'm like, okay, well.
That wasn't like, look, Craig Biscaya. Let's talk about Craig Biscaya at some stage.
Let me finish my story. This is not your, well,
I'm just defensive associated with any view that I'm elitist or snobbish or anything like that, Lionel, but you can continue.
Well,
Bruce is laughing hard enough. Let's move on.
I'm laughing. You mean Kelly?
No,
yes.
I thought
you gotta, Kelly, you have to do, Tom, you have to do Kelly. You can't say Bruce.
Well, the cameras aren't up anymore, and let's just move on.
So anyways, we finally decided this podcast literally is going to be broadcast 5 days or 6 days from when we were recording it. It's now 2:00 in the morning Eastern Daylight Time.
Congratulations, Lionel.
Thank you. Before we go, moving on. Remember when you remember when he did the Kelly questions? Every time we said a question, he'd be moving on. Anyways, we're going to record with this. We're going to broadcast this like 6 days later. And when we were trying to arrange the time. There was like, there's this happening. Your twins are in hockey or something, and they're doing ballet and this and that. And the next thing, and we had to finally find a time to. But then we saw on your Facebook page that you ended up in the hospital. How'd you do that?
Yeah. Oh my goodness! This has been quite the month, quite the year. Well, you mentioned my twins. Let's start with them.
How old are they? How old are they now? They're 14 and 15?
15 months.
Oh.
15 months going on 7.
14 and 15 months?
No, the twins are both the same age.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They're girls.
All right. If their names are Muffin and Princess, I'm stopping this right now.
They're not Muffin and Princess, Lionel. You didn't get the naming rights on them, unfortunately. They're very interesting names, actually. The eldest is called Adelaide. And Adelaide is a town in Australia. In fact, it's the town I was born in Australia.
Wow.
And have you been to Adelaide? Anyone been to Adelaide?
No.
Nope.
Okay. Adelaide's a beautiful city, well worth seeing. I used to spend my holiday time there. My grandparents, who really are the reason that I started Model Rail Radio. I mentioned my paternal grandfather, but my maternal grandfather and my maternal grandmother are just really central characters in my life. So they lived in Adelaide, and I used to go visit them in Adelaide and stay with them. And so I've got Adelaide, and the youngest is called Amelia. Amelia is a real bruiser, speaking of hockey. Like, she could be a hockey player right now, easily.
Right. So you're talking about Adelaide, Australia, not Adelaide, Georgia?
No, Adelaide, Australia, which I think predates Adelaide, Georgia, I think.
You wish.
Where does Adelaide, Georgia in the Civil War? I don't think Adelaide, Georgia was in the Civil War, was it?
I have no idea.
Very good. I thought you had like Wikipedia just like on lock. Well, anyway.
It says Adelaide is an unincorporated community located in Camilla, Georgia County.
Oh, interesting.
In Mitchell County. The community once had a post office, and the elevation is 200 feet above.
Don't you love these Wikipedia entries? They're always great. They once had a post office.
No, it's just that you Australians are like, have you ever been to Adelaide? It's a place in Australia. Well, there's other Adelaides, okay?
George Washington probably did something in Adelaide. Anyway.
Oh, God.
So anyway,
I've been in this country a long period of time. Anyway, what happened was this year has just been very curious. It's like COVID part 2. And I've thankfully avoided COVID, and yet I'm here in front of the AML Network talking very freely. So, yeah, just like, it's been an interesting year.
So how did you end up in the hospital? The questions are...
I had a high fever. I've had a high fever every weekend and I've not gotten COVID apparently, but I had a high fever, and I said to my boss, I'm going to take 5 days off. And I said to my wife, I'm going to take 5 days off. And I ended up in the hospital. And because I'm an idiot, I managed to bang my head in the hospital, which is really like in America is not the right thing to do. And concussed myself, and that added 3-4 days onto the hospital stay.
Wow.
If you're going to bang your head, I guess the hospital's a good place to be.
Except they have video footage, and the orderlies play the video footage in rotation, and you get...
It's
like, maybe you can monetize it.
This is Nevada. I think they're already... I think you can probably find it on YouTube currently. It'll be under my name pretty soon.
They're probably taking bets on it, too.
The orderlies. Well, I think they had a game where they played it on repeat, and just like literally the orderlies lost their collective beings in laughter.
So why did you fall? How did you fall? Out of the bed or something?
Let's not talk about how.
He was in the bathroom.
No. I was nominally going to get some food.
Right.
And some guy, this isn't even documented now because this is the way hospitals do these things. Some guy ran into me. I landed on the ground. I hit my head, and then I got out of the hospital on the Friday. I went in on the Monday, got out on the Friday.
Were you wearing one of those hospital gowns?
No, the last time I did an impressive fall, I was wearing Pooh Bear slippers. This is in 2004. Like literally, if you can imagine me falling down some stairs. No, look, literally. And the funny thing is, the rumor circulated at work that they were Donald Duck slippers. I said, no, they were Pooh Bear slippers. Thank you very much.
That's so much better.
But on this recent fall, were you wearing a hospital gown?
No.
So, fortunately...
He said he was just in his Pooh slippers.
just a slip. All you were wearing was slippers.
I thought this was a really good idea to actually appear on the AML network. Anyway, so yeah, hit my head, was in hospital, got out of hospital, and right here, folks, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Barbalet in front of you, talking to you in 6 days' time.
So, wow. So how do you feel now?
I feel like it would have been better that I just held the fever and told my boss I wanted 5 days off and just dealt with the fever.
You're not making the twins sick, I hope.
No, they were sick. Literally, when I got out of the hospital, they were hitting the cold. It was a cold. I mean, colds now are like COVID because they've got to be like COVID in order to survive. I know. We live in a crazy universe currently.
Yeah. You weren't one of those guys wearing a mask when you were in the car by yourself, were you?
No. Okay, that's not one of those guys.
Did they figure out what caused the fever?
Once I hit my head, it was like, let's just get this guy out of here as quickly as possible. He's going to sue us.
A liability.
Yeah, I was a liability. And believe me, my wife has never experienced hospital staff that are so rude. Like, literally, she didn't talk to any of my doctors. They would refuse to meet with her face to face. So the whole thing was just,
Sounds like you need an attorney.
Yeah, there you go.
I just need to get on with my life. And get
$300.
Believe me.
Yeah, $300.
Believe me. I need to appear on the AML network. That's exactly what I need to do. That's the whole purpose of today.
Exactly.
Wow.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow is right.
You know what you need to do? You need to go to look on my Facebook page and look for day 2,922. That'll straighten you out in a hurry.
No, believe me. No, I thought about you a lot when I was in that hospital. Let me tell you.
He didn't even need a gown.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that's right.
Well, the thing about hospitals after that kind of fall is they went through everything. My heart was connected. Everything was connected. Like they literally once you've knocked yourself out, and they're like, this guy's 45. He's lost a bunch of weight. What's wrong with him? Let's work out all the... literally, you're going through all these crazy permutations of medical stuff. It's just like,
But it sounds
they
like
got to get their billing
down by somebody.
Yeah, they got to get their billing fees up, Tom.
Without question, they've completely eliminated my year's worth of medical.
So your daughter's names are Adelaide and what's the second one?
Amelia.
Those are two good names.
Yeah, really.
Look, Michelle, 100% her. Like literally. The middle names are also important. I mean, the whole thing is just top to bottom.
I'm very impressed. Adelaide and Amelia. Those are two good names. Well done. Yeah. I was afraid you were going to say something like,
Well, you already made that joke, so you can't make it again, Lionel.
Well, yeah, it was like something goofy, but you've picked two good names. So that's important because now those two young ladies will be able to go through life with regular names and that's a very good job. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you and Michelle for doing that.
It's all Michelle.
That's kind of what I'm just trying to make you feel better.
I know.
So I have a question for you about model railroading.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think now? Well, the last time we talked, we used to enjoy talking about the NMRA and basically.
Oh, we love to.
And
then you recreate the NMRA thanks to Gordy Robinson, and I've got nothing more to say.
Yeah, and we love to complain because it wasn't run very well by a bunch of guys that were completely out of touch. And now we have young Master. I like to refer to him as Young Master Robinson.
Mm.
I think that's more suitable.
He's got a good wife too.
He's got a great wife.
Yeah.
But anyways, what do you think now of the NMRA? What do you think of Young Master Robinson?
I think it's getting more intricate. Like the whole thing is it's interesting because I think when I first saw Gordy, I loved the energy. We're going to talk about Craig Biscay, I guess, sometimes.
After this, we will talk about Craig.
So my view is very similar energy to Craig Biscay, just completely not even in any way annoyed. Like literally, you have people that are like net positive. You have people that are kind of neutral. I'm more neutral. I get annoyed by things a lot easier, as this podcast points out on a regular basis. But my view is that Gordy just has that energy and that persistence and that drive. And he's like literally 1 in a million for model railroading. And you got him on first and you got him like geared up. I mean, I don't know how much you are to be encouraged or to blame about Gordy Robinson, but you literally got his energy right on. And moreover, you've got the angst associated with the NMRA historically. More power to you. And Gordy was just able to do this stuff. Well, amazing.
And we have to give full credit to one of our regular contributors, Kevin Hardpart Marks, because him and I were talking one day, and I always liked Gordy, but frankly, when we would be at Hooters in Springfield, he would be able to be the one talking more than anybody else, and I always felt like, well, I always liked Gordy, but I always wanted to be, me. I like to be part of the show, and he was much better at commanding the room. Yeah. So when we got to that point of him running for president, I was kind of waffling a little bit, and I was having a discussion with Kevin Marks one day. I was driving my car. I can even remember where it was, and I was.
Did you have him on speakerphone?
Well, yeah, because he was in my car.
Oh, he was physically in your car?
No, but I was talking to him in my car.
Cool.
So he was
on speakerphone. I've been on speakerphone with you a couple of times.
You have been, yeah.
Yeah.
Usually I get out of the car when you're on speakerphone.
Exactly, I know.
So anyways, Gordy, I'm talking to Kevin about Gordy, and I'm saying, I'm kind of on the fence. I can't tell if he's too enthusiastic or blah, blah, blah. And then Kevin says, never stand in the way of somebody's enthusiasm. And right at that moment, I went, you know what? You're right. I'm going to throw all my support behind Gordy. I'm going to do whatever can to help him become the president of the NMRA. And I feel like the AML Network played a big role in that.
Yeah.
And I'm glad somebody pointed out the obvious to me.
Yeah. No.
Gordy is and it's turned out that Gordy is a very fine young man.
Without question. Let's not degrade him in terms of his age. He's wise beyond his years. And quite frankly, my view is that Gordy is, I don't know how many terms he can get, but just in what he's done in the first, 2 years?
Year and a half, year and a bit.
Year and a half, exactly. Not even 2 years, yeah.
So, I mean, he's a very sincere young man. He's knowledgeable. But mostly he's very sincere about making the NMRA a better place for all of us. So I was interested in your take on what the NMRA is today, because it's so much different from what it was 3 years ago.
I know this isn't a secret. Well, it's probably not a secret. I mean, I don't talk about it on Model Rail Radio, but I've had some real difficulties with the NMRA historically. Yes. Including I mean, there's this thing called xenophobia, which only impacts a small number of us. Clearly, Lionel, it's never touched you in any capacity, although you still don't come to California. We'll move on from that.
I've been to California 3 times in my life.
I know, but you don't currently. Anyway, you never come to Nevada.
I was in Nevada like 2 years ago.
I know. Well, I wasn't here. No, but now I'm here. So,
do you notice the pattern?
I think this is
I go where you aren't.
My perspective here, Lionel, is that one day we are going to be in the same place, and boy, it's going to be a whole lot of fun.
It is going to be fun. It's going to be a ton of fun.
Especially if he comes to Oregon, he's going to be.
Look, Bruce Wilson and I are so kindred about so many different things. I'm becoming more of a curmudgeon as I get older. But
welcome to the
club. Bruce knows what I'm talking about. He doesn't have to argue.
I always aspired to being like Frank Barone, and Gene said you got there years ago.
Well, you've got a good wife as well. So let's just move on.
I do.
From this. I mean, my view is that if I can be in your presence and Bruce Wilson's presence, look, Bruce Kelly and I have been in our presence collectively. I think Bruce and I had a conversation. Bruce Kelly, or Kelly as you call him, has listened to a bunch of my podcasts. He's an original Stone Ape listener. I mean, he really is.
That and Short Funk.
Yeah, now Long Funk. Yeah. So, I mean, Bruce Kelly and I, was it Portland, Oregon?
Portland. We sat and talked about.
My goodness.
I think we talked about marijuana. That's what we talked about.
That was the hot topic at the time. That's what everyone
What's the purpose of your trip to Oregon, sir?
Believe me. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the funny thing about doing podcasts for so long. And this is the whole thing about Model Rail Radio. This is the thing about the AML Network, as you well know, Lionel. You become friends with people just by talking.
Absolutely. It's the best part of it. That's the absolute best part of it. And
so anyway, when you, me, and Bruce Wilson get together, I think it's going to be at least 5 days worth of just,
shenanigans and tomfoolery come to mind.
Nothing but talking.
Okay.
And look, if Bruce Wilson ever comes to Nevada, I've done this recently on Model Rail Radio. A number of our listeners have come to Nevada, come to Las Vegas, and literally the last guy who did it, he's like, yeah, I'm in Las Vegas now. I'm like, you obviously haven't listened to the last podcast because I did a big thing in the last podcast about, hey, like, maybe you might want to meet me if you come to Las Vegas.
Yeah, just don't want to do it Uber, that's all.
Yeah, the Uber's pricey.
What's wrong with an Uber?
Costs
They're
too much.
expensive in Las Vegas.
Oh,
Wow.
You
Real expensive.
They are not.
Well,
I used Uber. When I was in Vegas, I went out to the Red Rock Casino, and I used Uber all over the place.
Literally, you could walk to my place from the Red Rock Casino.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good place to play poker. I did quite well there.
The problem is it's still very heavily smoking, unfortunately. Like all the restaurants they've connected to it, you have to inhale a few lungfuls and then you get and you eat your sushi, which tastes horrible by that point.
sushi in the desert.
Well, in the casinos, still
the best seafood swims 500 miles upstream.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So you wanted to talk to us about Craig Biscayr.
Yeah.
And because was he like a regular guy on your show or something?
He was an occasional guy. I mean, basically, Craig was big in Ryan Anderson's Model Railcast show.
Yeah,
right.
He basically filled in for Ryan after Ryan's passing, speaking of smoking. And he was someone who just raw energy in the podcast. Yeah. And then I met him. He came to Portland. He did a barbecue event with us. And then Michelle and I went and met Craig and Karen. And Craig Biscayr was just a really interesting character in the hobby. And to know him as a man and to know the podcasting persona and to know all those things together, I was told early about the situation with Craig, which wasn't particularly positive, and obviously impacted Karen and the family more than anyone. And then there was a long period, and I remember talking with Bruce Wilson about this, where we were waiting for Karen because she's the one who's, she's the one who's calling the shots with regards to Craig.
Right.
So Craig, I think people know about his death.
I don't. Tell us.
Pardon?
I don't.
Well, he had a stroke and then he died.
Okay.
Yeah, massive.
Yeah, it was horrible. The whole thing was just really. This is when he first contacted me.
How old was he?
I don't know how old he was. He was in his 50s, I think.
I think he's early to mid 50s.
Yeah, he's too young.
That's
definitely too young.
The 50s is a tricky age. That's when we lost that's when we lost Stuart Sterling and our Boston Joe. The 50s is pretty tricky. How old are you, Chris?
53.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, and I have seen a doctor.
Believe me.
Well, we know how old you are, Kelly. You're as old as dirt.
I'm 69 years old.
In your dreams. You look seriously?
Yeah, I'm 69. I had my birthday on the 19th.
And still can't outthrow a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, that was rude. Yeah, why didn't you, Tom, why didn't you come to the AML barbecue?
Craig's passing. We're doing a memorial show. I should have remembered the date before I got it. You insert the date here, Lionel, of when Model Rail Radio is doing the memorial show for Craig's passing.
Okay.
I think it's the 20th. I've got the internet here. Let me be dangerous.
Oh, there you go.
Intranet.
While you're doing that, I can remember
on September 10th. Look, here's my mind. There you go. September 10th, we're doing a morning show for the Craig Biscayr Memorial. Look, a number of Craig's friends and his wife reached out to me to do a video cast, especially. Not the wife directly, but a number of his friends. And obviously, I wanted Tim Harrison to be involved because obviously Tim did the Model Railcast show with Craig.
Right.
And Tim and I have worked together. This is the Joe Cummings studio, right?
It is.
Yes.
So even Joe and I, how's Joe doing, by the way, love? Do you keep in contact with Joe?
Joe passed away.
When did he pass away?
2 years ago.
No, I knew that. It's not the same guy.
No, I think you're thinking of a different person.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry, Lionel. I'm sorry to Joe fans out there.
Oh, yeah, me too.
I'm thinking of another Joe who was part of the Model Railcast thing. Anyway, sorry, my mind is not good on any note.
Well, you've taken a strike to the head, so.
Believe me. Yeah. Still recovering. Anyway, so Tim Harrison and I go back a long time. Even people like Scotty Mason,
right?
Based on the things, like literally, we've all communicated as podcasts, and obviously I communicate with Ryan Anderson a whole bunch before his passing. So the whole thing is just like a family. We're all family in this podcasting thing, right? Model railroading aside.
Yeah, see, that's not me. I'm not family in podcast.
Oh, you're like a cousin, Lionel.
Well, I'm a family. I'm family with you. Because if it hadn't been for you, I wouldn't even have a podcast.
That's why we need to get together one day.
But I'm not necessarily. I'm not necessarily. I look at the podcast more nowadays as a business. I run it as a business, and
you do.
And if you're going to have a business, you want to try to be the best that you can be.
Yeah.
Above all the other businesses, so that people come to your porch first.
I don't know. There are plenty of podcasts out there.
Yeah. That's like saying Johnny Carson having Merv Griffin on his show. Like Johnny Carson wasn't a fan of any of the other talk shows. He did have David Letterman on his show though frequently. Well, that's because he owned David Letterman's show.
Yeah, I guess so. You're
right.
Did he ever have Bill Murray?
Yeah, probably. I'm sure he did. Yeah, I think he did.
Yeah, I'm sure he did.
But Bill Murray wasn't a talk show host.
Oh, fair point.
So Craig passed away, and he was a big part of your model railroading world. And then
I wouldn't say that. I mean, he's a guy I knew, and he's a guy who my wife met, and these kind of things. I mean,
okay.
Look, Craig is eulogized by a lot of people. I see him as a person, first and foremost, as a podcasting energy. Like, literally every time he turned up, he put a smile on my face. And that's just the nature of Craig Biscar. Right?
That's definitely true.
Yeah.
So, my view is we need to have a memorial for him. It needs to be, it needs to be a thing. And unfortunately, I was in the hospital leading into the last, when it was supposed to be recorded. So we've moved it on to the next date.
When did Craig pass away? Like about a couple of months ago.
July 9th.
Oh, okay.
July, yeah.
Well, that's when he died.
That's when he passed away. But he was in the
about
hospital
a week after he had the stroke, I think.
No, it was longer than that. It was really not
longer.
Early June.
Like it's a testament to all of us just to be healthy and see the doctor.
Well, I remember there was an NMRAX event in. It must have been early June, middle of June, and Craig was one of the presenters, and I was hosting him. Well, his pre-recorded segment was going on. He and I were talking for a better part of an hour. What a fascinating man he was. We were talking about his stuff he was doing. He was all excited because he's finally got his lasers all figured out how to make parts for the road he's working on, which is like 1800, 1890s, the Houstonic.
I cleaned that. I went to his place and cleaned it up for a show that he was doing.
Yeah, so it's he's a fascinating man, a real nice guy. And then like a week or two later, we get this.
That's the unfortunate part of this whole human endeavor is that sometimes the light, every time, eventually for everybody, the lights go out.
Yeah.
As was it Morrison said, we all getting out of here. We're all leaving the same way.
Yeah.
Nobody gets out of here alive. So, and you wanted to talk about Terry Terrence?
Yeah, Terry Terrence is still communicating with me.
Good.
Like literally, Terry Terrence. I mean, he has had some health issues. He has had some really serious health issues. I saw him at the O-Scale convention 3, maybe 4 years ago now. He was having trouble walking and stuff. But this guy is like literally, he's like you, Lionel. I mean, you've beaten things. And Terry hasn't beaten them, but he's still like really, he complained. He called into Model Rail Radio just randomly about 8 weeks ago. And he was like, I shouldn't be on this podcast. I'm like, Terry, like the thing about Terry Terrence is he has a voice. I'm sure Bruce and Kelly will tell you this.
Yep.
Like he has a presence. And when you meet him, and obviously Kelly met him at show 100 for me, like literally this guy commands the room. Like no matter, and when he started appearing on Model Rail Radio, I'm like, this guy's really interesting. Like I really wanted to know more about Terry Terrence, and I got to know a lot about Terry Terrence. And thankfully, he and I still shoot each other emails. Now, I do have a bone to pick with you, Lionel.
Okay.
Like, literally, when you cleaned up your layout, you said you were going to send me a boxcar. You never did.
I haven't cleaned it up yet.
Well, okay. Anyway, and then you started sending ores out to people, and obviously you were going through a bunch of stuff, and I don't want to complain about you at all. But Terry Terrence has saved this car, which I've been corresponding with him about. It's a 3-thing hopper, 2-railo scale, which seems to be the scale that I've shaken out in this hobby. Like, literally, I'm going to be a 2-railo scale.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. How does it happen? Well, Terry Terrence sends me a 2-railo scale locomotive that I had to assemble and sand down and get all the nicks out and all this other stuff. So yeah, I knew I was kind of passionate about 2-railo scale. It's a good size for the aging gentleman who falls over occasionally in a hospital and these kind of things. So, my view is that actually I feel very much at home with 2-railo scale, but I really, really, really wanted a piece from Terry Terrence's layout to just set this thing off. Now, historically, about 5 years ago, I bought a Canadian Pacific guy's 3 out of 5 of his eBay lots. So I've got a Canadian Pacific locomotive, a caboose, and a bunch of other stuff from him. And I've gotten various bits and pieces because I went to the 2-railo scale convention. So I have those 2 cars plus a bunch of other little bits and pieces. I've just collected over the past, say, 10 years. Anyway, Terry started selling off his stuff. I don't know. Did anyone receive Terry Terrence's emails? I don't know. He's been selling off his stuff for probably the better part of 6 to 8 months. And he sent me an email in April saying he had this hopper destined for me. And I was like, I got out of hospital. I'm like, I've got to get in contact with Terry Terrence and make sure that hopper hasn't gone in, his children probably deserve a good amount of his, trains. But I was like, so I emailed him and he's emailed me straight back. Like, literally, it's like communicating with Terry Terrence 6 years ago. So really, I've been communicating a lot with Terry Terrence. I'd like to get back in contact with Jim Gore, who I know has been on your show. And my view is that it's these people in the hobby, particularly just the voices. And remember, people used to call me, this is very strange here, what's the guy's name? Jerry Springer of Model Railroading. Do you remember that?
Yep.
Okay. I got Jerry Springer to record some audio for me. He recorded a video. I've got to show it actually to my family because I was telling my family tonight about Jerry Springer. Yep. Jerry Springer recorded some really good audio for me.
Audio for you, yeah.
And it's a video actually. The video of Jerry Springer saying, I don't know who this, he was talking about Marty McGurk, of course. I don't know who this character is. But, if you're the Jerry Springer Model Railroading, more power to you. I'm sure at least one of you's heard the audio. Anyway, and so, yeah, my view is that...
Wait a minute. Time out. You got Jerry Springer to record audio for you?
It was a video. It's pretty cool, actually.
And nobody's ever seen it?
No, a few of you...
Yeah, we've heard it.
Yeah, I've heard of it, yeah.
Yeah. I posted on my Facebook group. I mean, it's not like you ever look at my Facebook, Lionel. But
how often do you look at mine?
I look at yours all the time. Most of the photos.
How did you get Jerry Springer to record audio? You just sent him
I paid him like $100 or $200, I think.
Oh, really?
Like yeah.
Oh, okay.
He was going cheap, and I was like, I've got to get Jerry Springer to record some audio. And look, he's really good. I mean, he has run for governor and various other things.
Yeah, you ought to have a show.
You ought to have a show. I know.
Well,
he recorded some amazing audio. I'll find the podcast where he did.
Yeah, find it.
Radio. It's a funny show.
Well, some people have referred to you as the Jerry Springer of model railroad podcasting.
You know why they do that? Because I break people like Terry Terrence and Jim Lincoln. I didn't break, but I brought him on more frequently than others. And, people actually choose to call into Model Rail Radio. Let's make that point for your listenership. So, I was called the Jerry Springer of Model Railroading because I had Jim Lincoln on and Terry Terrence and Jim Gore and, you obviously...
So are you saying these guys are crackpots?
No, that's exactly
that's the kind of people Jerry Springer had on was crackpots.
At each other?
This is Marty McGurk being Marty McGurk.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say anything about Marty McGurk because he's a good friend. But it's Marty McGurk being Marty McGurk, right?
Complaining about guys eating peanut butter at his op sessions.
Oh, well, Brillo pads. I actually brought a Brillo pad peanut butter to one of his op sessions.
What did you
This was a joke.
What did you say, Chris?
There was a story, if I've got it right, there was somebody that wanted a peanut butter sandwich at one of his op sessions.
I bought a peanut butter and a Brillo pad the first and last time I attended Marty McGurk's op session in homage to that.
Oh, God.
Can't make this stuff up.
You can't.
Welcome back.
And just real quick on Terry Terrence, Lionel, wasn't Terry Terrence kind of an inspiration for the AML as well?
I was going to get to that.
Okay,
so I've met. Well, no, you don't have to be sorry.
I just want to make sure I had the right guy.
Yeah, no, you're right. I was going to say I had met Terry Terrence probably almost a half a dozen times at Springfield.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And nothing but a gentleman. He's strictly very much of a gentleman. I even interviewed him once on one of my little interview with my little stuff. And always a gentleman. Very nice man. Very, very nice man.
He's an amazing man. He's an inspiration for us all. Let's just put that out there. I mean, I look at Terry Terrence as a way to live your life.
So anyways, when in the early days of when I was on your podcast, this is how this is one of the two ways this podcast started was there used to be a guy in Model Railroader called Jim Finley that used to write in the 60s, wrote letters from Jim. And it was about a guy. He was in the service. In military service, he was stationed in South Korea, and it was all about, it was funny letters about trying to build a model railroad in South Korea. And that was one influence. And then when I was on Model Rail Radio, and you weren't trying to get me to fight with this professor guy.
Oh, for God's sake.
That's the Jerry Springer part.
Yeah, Jerry Springer. Jerry Springer.
I've got the world's smallest violin. One of my co-workers got it from me from England.
So anyways, one night, Terry Terrence was talking about something, blah, 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 some electronic thing. And I said, how did you learn how to do this? And he said,
goodness.
And he said, well, I for a living, I designed the cockpit for Black Hawk helicopters.
Oh, yes, he did.
And I go, whoa.
Yes,
Let's back this bus up here a couple of steps.
Oh,
and I wanted to talk to him about that. And then everybody after 10 minutes is going, no. Let's get back to model railroading.
Terry Terrence is a fascinating man.
Let's get back to model railroading. And at that point, I thought, I'm going to show that Barbalet character. I'm going to start my own podcast. And not only will we talk about model railroading.
I created a very good podcast, Lionel. When people ask the podcasts that I've helped create, the AML Network is first off the bat.
No, if it wasn't for you, there would be no AML Network.
Yeah.
He's like the Godfather.
Yeah.
Who falls over in a hospital and is played on rotation by the orderlies. Yeah.
Now, why would you wait till you're in your early 40s to have twins?
Oh, that's a big question here, Lionel. Look, I was going to ask you if you ever took your son to Hooters, but it's a
Oh yeah. My 37-year-old son. Yeah,
I'm talking about
we've been to a few places.
Yeah, look, I've been waiting to have children, and these two girls are everything I've ever wanted.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That is very, very cool. And you've given them normal names, and they're going to grow up to be beautiful girls. You are you're very, very fortunate, and I'm very, very happy for you.
Thank you very much, Lionel. It's much appreciated.
I want to ask you a question. Now, I want you to I want to have a serious discussion about this next topic, because I feel like you have a lot to offer about this topic. You started your podcast 13 years ago. I listened to I remember listening to the very first one on one of my trips to Florida by myself. It was at the beginning of when I'm starting. So I thought, I'm going to go back. And the very first one you did all by yourself.
A monologue. The first two I think I did as a monologue.
Yeah. And about model railroading. And then eventually somebody called in. You found somebody.
Chris Abbott. That's right. My goodness.
And so I want to know from what have you seen change in model railroading via what's changed in model railroading and the social media of model railroading in these 13 years? Because I think you started at an interesting time, and I think the last 13 years have been fascinating. What stands out in your mind first
Well, I told you about, was it Bruce Chubb's layout? Have I told you about Bruce Chubb's layout?
No, I've never heard of Bruce Chubb.
Bruce Chubb created. We can all laugh here, those of us that know about Bruce Chubb. Bruce Chubb's layout is like literally he's got the train going through the restroom and stuff. I mean, it's like the most extreme model railroading layout I think I've ever. Actually, that's not true. I've seen some pretty extreme ones in the San Francisco Bay Area, but just in general, Bruce Chubb's layout stands alone. And I was in Bruce Chubb's layout, and the model railroader guys were in Bruce Chubb's layout at the same time. And literally, that's how I found the bathroom, because they forced me into the bathroom because their egos were so big. And the change happened when I was at, what's the guy's name? Dave Vaughan, who has an O-scale layout based on, well, he's got bits of, what's the fellow's name? Oh, this is the wrong night to be recording.
John Armstrong.
John Armstrong. He's got bits of John Armstrong's layout. The model railroader guys were there. I was there. And Dave Vaughan said, sorry, I need to help Tom Barbalet. And literally my wife wanted to ask a question, and Michelle took the lead, as she often does. And Dave Vaughan shooed aside the model railroader guys and helped out Michelle and gave us an amazing tour. Dave Vaughan's a really fascinating man. I'm amazed that Terry Terrence has not given large chunks of his layout to Dave Vaughan, but, they've worked together and done a bunch of stuff together. So it was the change in Model Railroader magazine, which obviously is part of, it's not how you got your start, Lionel, but it certainly gave you a bit of a, an influence in the hobby. So, I mean, my view is that it's the transition between old media and new media, and just, I don't want to say bitterness. I don't want to say that these people, because now I don't mind if, they approach me they do occasionally approach me on Facebook and try to be friends and things like that. But my view is it's the transition between old media and new media that I've seen. Like literally being in layouts, being pushed into a toilet versus being in layout and literally having the layout owner who, look, have you ever been to Dave Vaughan's layout?
I never have. I've never even heard of Dave Vaughan.
Dave Vaughan, it's a 2-rail scale thing. You'd need to be into that to get to his layout probably. Dave Vaughan has the most curious, if you're coming to our layout, and his wife does the sniff test on you as you go down into his layout. I guess he said too many people have played with the trains a bit too much.
How do you spell his last name?
Vaughn, not to be confused with Stephen Vaughan, Jr. and Senior.
Oh, okay.
They're to Stephen Vaughan Senior. As soon as first time he met me, we were literally at the O-Scale National. We were in was it a Bruce Chaplin, or it was the gentleman whose name one of the Bruces called out just now, the 2-rail O-scaler from
John Armstrong.
John Armstrong. We were in a John Armstrong thing, quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Stephen Vaughan Senior hears me talking to someone. I was sitting next to someone. Literally gets up. We're in an auditorium, not a big auditorium, a small auditorium. Got up, gave me this huge bear hug, inappropriate length of time, and I just loved it. Quite frankly, I like being hugged. And this man had a really good hug. And I just thought, this was another point where I realized that I'd made it. Like that whole O-Scale National where Terry Terrence was one of the few conventions where I felt, and then I went to a narrow gauge convention, and let's not even talk about that. But anyway, like it was one of those things where like this transition occurred literally at the O-Scale National that year.
What year? What year was that?
I don't know. It must have been. It was probably 2017, something like that. 2017, maybe. Yeah, 2017, 2018.
So just recently, like 2000.
Yeah, like literally, it's happened pretty soon. I mean, COVID's happened since then, and a bunch of other stuff.
Right.
Happened,
so it was like in the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, I've seen the transition in front of me with a hug from Stephen Vaughan Senior. Anyway, Dave Vaughan is a really nice guy. His layout, like you said, his wife does a sniff test. The layout instructions are like joke layout. I mean, you've probably been to enough layouts that you know that the layout instructions, some people satirize them, some people go pretty hardcore on them. This is a really you've made it to come and see my layout kind of set of instructions that you've given. And literally, you're going to be shaken down by the wife before you get into the layout as you go through the process. So Dave Vaughan, really nice gentleman, long-standing 2-rail O-scaler, based in the kind of broader DC area, similar to Marty McGurk. And although Marty McGurk's not a 2-rail O-scaler, but just a salt-of-the-earth guy. And when he pushed aside, I won't even mention the Model Railroad, magazine folks, when he was like, no, Michelle, you have the floor. And like that was just really humbling for me. I was just like, I was pushed in a toilet with you guys, probably 2012, like literally high school style stuff. I mean, that's what it came down to. Anyway, that was the transition. Heard it here first on the AML Network.
I think we've heard the toilet story before.
I probably told it to you, but yeah.
You feel like that's when the transition happened, when you were pushed into the toilet?
Well, no, that's indicative of how badly.
Well, I think you bring up a very good point. I think it's a discussion I have with our buddy Uncle Dave Abelies. I was actually having that discussion with him today. I feel very strongly that Model Railroader is completely oblivious. No, they're not oblivious to it, but they're.
Oh, they know it.
They're still fighting. They're still fighting to keep the old world going.
They can't do it.
And it's like it's changed. So with my question to you though is, in the 13 years since you started this podcast as a monologue, you did it all by yourself. I mean, what possessed you? What was it that possessed you to do because you weren't a model railroader per se.
Still really are. I mean, you can amass those scale, but yeah.
So what was it that possessed you to start
It was my grandparents. It was my grandfather's. And it was, I'm an old radio guy. Like literally as a boy, I used to go into like the local community radio and stuff like that. And they interviewed me periodically. And I've always enjoyed the radio format. Let's not talk about NPR. Maybe we should talk about, you want to talk about NPR?
If you want.
NPR has the most, look, literally, once you do these podcasts, you start looking at old media.
Well, now we're getting to it. You see, I don't. Yeah. You're always talking in riddles.
No, that's what they said in the hospital. That's why they wouldn't let me out.
So okay. So you're talking about NPR, like
yeah.
So what? That's my point. Is like, what was it that possessed you, a guy that's not a model railroader, to start a model railroad podcast? I want to ask
that question, but I can tell it.
I know, but you're being very evasive, as if you're.
Let's talk about NPR first, please, all right. If we may. NPR in Las Vegas, when I used to live in Las Vegas in 2007, did a funding drive which went on for 6 months because they couldn't make the money they wanted to make, and they started doing things like they started announcing how much every show cost on NPR. I was already doing podcasts then. I'm like. You can censor that or amplify it. And I literally was like, how on earth is this a thing? How is NPR a thing? And then the Toyota thing happened, where Toyota, they couldn't work out the brakes or something. And Toyota paid NPR a bunch of money, and NPR did a bunch of puff pieces, and they did all this advertising. And I'm just like, I mean, like literally, I just couldn't understand NPR as a phenomenon. I've appeared on BBC. I've appeared on BBC4. I've done things with the BBC. I don't think the BBC is that great. I don't think their television wing is that great. I think a lot of the stuff they do is pretty poor. But NPR is just like the blueprint of what not to do with regards to... like, literally everything in model rail radio is the antithesis of NPR.
Well, okay. What does NPR stand for? National
Public Radio. Normally.
Okay. All right. Aren't they the guys that had the guy, the guy on there that...
Like Wobegon.
Yeah, but also they had that guy from the New York City area,
Charlie Rose.
No, yeah. His last name was Sweaty, and he was on NPR.
Oh, Sweaty
Balls. On Saturday Night Live. That
Baldwin. Guy. That was Baldwin on SNL.
Oh, anyway. So that wasn't really NPR.
That was
the television side.
Satire on NPR.
Yeah.
Oh,
anyway,
so somehow
recordings with my wife, the whole thing was like ridiculous. It was like a who's who, and you had to dress up, and people and everyone said hello Tom, hello Tom, hello Tom, like they knew me, and there were people I'd met accidentally 3 years before. It was all very curious.
Well, hang on, what are you talking about? You went to do something?
We did Prairie Home Companion. We went to a recording of that. We did a recording. I went to a few of the NPR recordings with my wife because my wife loved supporting NPR. You know the problem? I donated a bunch of money to PBS when I first came to this country in 2000.
Right.
And for that, I got a DVD, which was for a period of time available free on YouTube.
Right. Well, yeah, but you know what? For just 365 payments of 16 cents a day, you could have twice as much AML podcasting every week.
You got part of the NPR model. Yeah.
Oh God!
What you need to do is funding drives, Lionel. That I would pay to listen to.
Hey, I got a great conversation for you. I'm interested in your opinion on this. I think I'm slowly starting to waffle towards one side, but I'm very, very interested in your opinion on this.
Okay.
So no kidding around. No Tom Barbalet.
I never give you honest. What's the point of lying to Lionel Strand? Continue.
Well, I don't know. I don't think you ever lie, but your stories have. One minute we're on the BBC, and the next, and I'm very confused. So
I still don't know why he started the podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we still don't know why he started the
Ask me
podcast.
your question, Lionel. Let's move through this.
Oh, he tried to
I
answer your
missed it.
question, but then you wanted to get talking about NPR.
Yeah, exactly. I did ask you a
Okay.
question. So
Continue.
I have had several, more than a half a dozen inquiries about sponsoring my free podcast. Every Monday there's a free podcast, and every Tuesday there's a podcast that you pay that you get if you're a Patreon member. So I've now the podcast, my podcast, the Monday one, the free one is downloaded. Well, we've had 750,000 downloads total.
Oh yeah.
But they're now to the point where every individual episode is downloaded over 1,000 times within a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah.
And so I've actually had several, at least a half a dozen manufacturers want to be part of.
Oh yeah.
And I'm interested in your opinion because I'm pretty sure I'm going to do it eventually over the next year because, I'm a businessman and that's what you do. So I'm interested in your opinion on that.
Oh, Audible, MasterCard, maybe even Toyota. I mean, my view is there was a period of time where I got contacted all the time by people that had nothing to do with model railroading, wanting to. And the whole thing, look, my view is you do you, I do me, Lionel. I don't have anything to say against what you've done here. It would be rather interesting. The fact that you haven't disassembled your layout indicates to me solidly that you could have, your layout be a character on this podcast, and you could get, Walthers or I don't even want to mention some of these manufacturers.
How do you know I haven't disassembled my layout?
You told me that literally however many
3 years ago.
Well, okay. Have you disassembled your layout, Lionel?
Yeah, I did it it's not there anymore.
Okay. You just didn't send me a box card back in the day. Okay.
Well, I haven't finished. It's packed up. I have them.
That's fair. I'm not fussed.
Did Neil Erickson put you up to this?
Neil Erickson puts me up to a lot of things, but not this particular thing. He's a great guy, Neil Erickson.
Okay, but I'm interested in your opinion about this.
My view is, if you're going to look, I'm a child. Literally, I've heard this. Maybe Bruce Wilson can tell me because he has a child of this generation. You probably can't, Lionel. Apparently, the term "selling out" is no longer a thing. Like when I was a child into my teens, selling out was a thing. My view is, if you're going to take sponsorship from a manufacturer, why not Lionel? Why not Lionel? Why doesn't Lionel sponsor you, Lionel?
Lionel.
I'm sorry. Why don't they sponsor you?
I haven't approached them.
You should. Get the biggest, loudest, noisiest, smoke-chuggingest trains you possibly can, Lionel.
Well, I'm thinking though, I would also like to, if I'm going to do it, I'd like to do it at an amount of money that would be available to any manufacturer. I don't want to charge some godly amount so that you only get the big guys. I would like.
What you need? You need Hooters and.
Like my friend Chris Costello. He owns.
He's an interesting cat.
He owns JL Innovative.
Yeah.
He couldn't afford massive amounts of money, so I'd much prefer. I think it's more organized. If it's okay, you can't be. If I let people advertise for free, well, that just opens up a floodgate that you can't.
I'm not even talking about that. I'm talking about Hooters and Lionel sponsoring the AML Network.
That's ridiculous.
It's not ridiculous, Lionel. You're just thinking too small.
I just want your opinion about whether or not I should do it.
I think you should.
Okay.
Boots and all. Go in with boots and all.
He said boots.
Boots.
Yeah.
Not the UK toiletries company. Seriously.
Well, I want to include. I want to make it available to smaller manufacturers that can't.
That's the difficulty, Smaller manufacturers. Tim Werris, you know, I mean,
Tim Werris is not a small manufacturer.
No,
that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there are a bunch of folks
But
in
he doesn't
Canada.
need to advertise.
He doesn't, believe me. His stuff advertises itself.
I know.
Every person who's ever bought his stuff has shown me his stuff. Like, literally, you go into their layout and they're like, have you seen these fast track jigs? And then you see, like, typically between 15 to 50 pounds worth of metal. And then they're like, have you seen this fast track jig and this fast track? Like, that's an addiction. Like, that's just crack.
They're not.
They all become ambassadors.
They're not. They're not jigs.
Yeah,
they're
jigs, no.
fixtures.
Fixtures.
Well, they're home protection as well. They're bulletproof and they can certainly whack out a...
Put them in a
Somebody hit him with,
Oh, man.
break in and somebody's going to hit you with
You've
it.
been worse knocked out than me in a hospital.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So you started the podcast in 2009. What is the difference you've seen and the impact you've seen of social media since 2009 and don't involve NPR or the BBC?
Model magazine, I think, is the example that I gave. That was the transition, right? Being treated like someone who should be forced in a toilet to being, excuse me, this gentleman's wife has some questions. Let's talk to him. I mean, like, literally, it's old media versus new media.
So it went from the folks at Model Railroader being the celebrities because that's what everybody knew and what everybody was exposed to transitioning to
and actually, let's
the new media.
Right. Yeah,
and now the celebrities in the new media are folks that are doing podcasts and they have websites or YouTube channels.
It's more important than that. Stephen Vaughan Sr., Dave Vaughan was actually giving the presentation on the Fellows layouts, John Armstrong. And he saw Stephen Vaughan Sr., who's a big guy, he's a model railroading man, come up and hug me. And he's like, wow, maybe I need to pay attention to that crazy guy with the fake accent. I mean, it really is very strange to me how like, literally just, like, seeing Stephen... I mean, I think probably Dave Vaughan seeing Stephen Vaughan Sr. hug me inappropriately long was probably what Dave Vaughan took away. And when he saw me in his layout, he's like, screw these paper pushers. And was like, yeah, let his wife ask the questions. I mean, look, that is the transition I've seen. And it's happened in my lifetime.
So the transition you're seeing is that there is a huge impact from the old style of just the paper magazines to...
It was, and it's no longer.
Right.
They can't honor the same... Because we've got Jim Lincoln and Jim Gifford and, Terry Terrence and a whole bunch of folk and Craig Biscayne and, people that the magazines never would have courted because they're seen as I don't want to quote Muddy McGurk, but, like Jerry Springer people. I mean, the whole nature of the magazines is so elitist and stupid and just not about what model railroading was about.
Well, the impact is much more widespread now, and at the same time, much more accessible. You can contact these folks directly through social media, and you can have a conversation with them on a podcast. And it's all very fluid and very community based, where it's not all remote like magazines were, where you have to maybe write a letter into the editor and maybe it'll get published, maybe not.
I mean, people died before their layouts were published in Model Railroad.
Right.
I mean, like, literally that gives you an indication. And I mean, Jim Gore's like got his layout in and Jim Gore is still here. Terry Terrence, sadly, who knows, but he won't get his layout in Model Railroad, or I don't think. But there were plenty of people who actually died while they were waiting for their layouts to be published in Model Railroad magazine. I mean, that's just disgusting. Like, let's call it what it is. It's just disgusting. It's reprehensible, and these people clearly didn't represent the hobby when they represented the hobby. They were about pushing certain people. I know, Lionel, you were in the pages. I love my Lionel Strang collection of model railroaders, including the photo of your son and wife on the cover. But let's get this straight. This magazine was not about, and still has completely lost the hobby of model railroading to being an elitist rag that, quite frankly, needed to get some decent graphic design in the 80s.
Well, okay, but let's have that discussion. You've touched on, that's a very good point, is that the Model Railroader was an elitist magazine, and to be in it was an incredible... I mean, Rod Stewart said he would rather be on the cover...
Good.
He'd rather be on the cover of Model Railroader than on the cover of Rolling Stone. It means that much. That's another... I got another question I want to ask you when I'm done with this. So it was an elitist, not on purpose necessarily. I mean, it became an elitist thing because they were kind of the only show in town. There was other magazines, but Model Railroader was the main show in town.
Yeah.
And it's gone. It now what has happened is everybody has the same opportunity to try to show their stuff where before it wasn't. And yet it's become very watered down. Yeah. I have no problem saying that next to yours, of course. This is the best. This is the best podcast in model railroading. And I have no problem saying that because I'm very proud of the effort we put in here.
You should be. You should be. Yeah.
But there's that whole level. Then behind that, there's a whole level. Anybody can do something and put it out on the internet now, which has changed the whole game completely.
Oh, yeah. Without question. Yeah. I mean, look, I've carved out a little niche with Model Rail Radio, and every time I appear on your network, I get email after email after email after email from your listeners saying, I never even knew who the hell you were. And I won't even say, like, literally when I used to do podcasts, people would say some pretty disgusting things to me. But thankfully, none of your listeners have done that. But yeah, who's the strange sounding guy and why has he got a podcast? And now I started listening to your podcast, and now I'm getting into your podcast. So actually appearing on your podcast every 50 or 100 shows has, gotten a whole bunch of new listeners, and they love coming on Model Rail Radio and plugging your podcast like it's going out of style. And I don't mind that at all.
Well, and you make it very, like, there's really no limit. Anybody can be on Model Rail Radio. That's one of the endearing qualities of Model Rail Radio.
Cool.
Yeah, Chris, because you've been on a few times, haven't you?
I have.
It's a funny thing that you just open up an internet connection. Like, literally, people don't understand. I'm constantly explaining to people why Model Rail Radio still works. Like, why people still... I put up a time, and I still get 5 to 10 to 15 interesting people calling in. Like, that whole concept is, like, literally, you just have a time and people call in. And I have to explain to people, and look, seriously, Terry Terrence, Jim Gore, Dave Falkenberg. I mean, let's talk about Dave Falkenberg. Like, and, Rich Murphy and these kind of people, these are professionally fascinating people. And they're also model railroaders.
Right.
And you hear it in their voices. When you talk to Terry Terrence, you are talking to a man who has done some serious stuff in the world. When you talk to Jim Gore, when you talk to a bunch of people, even have you ever been to a train store while Jim Lincoln is holding the floor, Lionel? It really is. Look, Jim
He's
Lincoln,
the Chevrold's guy, right?
Yeah, Jim Lincoln Chevrolet. I could never understand how a guy named Jim Lincoln ended up owning a Chevrolet dealership.
I've seen him in ninja pajamas, let's just say. He stayed at Show 100. Yeah. Like, literally, he stayed an appropriate length of time.
There seems to be a common thread with you. People that hug you inappropriately long. You see people...
Blue slippers.
Yeah, him seeing Jim Lincoln in ninja pajamas. Like, what's the website for Model Rail Radio?
It's Model Rail Radio, all one word, no spaces.com.
Okay. I'm gonna go there just so I can find So you still haven't really answered the question of what possessed you?
I just thought it was a fascinating thing. Like, I had this Buy It Alive thing, and I thought there aren't enough Model Rail podcasts. So at the time, look, Scotty Mason was a pretty big guy, right, in the field of podcasting. Mm-hmm. And I've not been on his show, but he's certainly been on my show a couple of times. And I've literally, because he was having a problem with his podcast at one stage, I was able to call him out about the guy who was causing problems. And he called me literally at work. Literally, I was sitting in a work booth, as these companies have, talking to Scotty Mason about all kinds of crazy nonsense. And yeah, I mean, look, literally when I started my podcast, there was Scotty's podcast, there was Ryan's podcast, and there was a whole bunch of people recording N-scale attempt podcasts, let's just say. Mm-hmm. And my view was, I used to go to train shows as a boy. My grandfather had a train set that we'd bring out at Christmas time, which we'd plug together. I've got photos of my brothers plugging it together. My other grandfather, who was the barber, was a Second World War veteran and just an amazing man. Like, when you were in his presence, you knew we were in the... Like, literally, he crawled into a Panzer that was smoking, grabbed a camera, and took photographs of the rest of his tour of the Second World War, which I have. I've scanned out, I've digitized them. Any of your listeners contact me, I'll show you the photos. He saw the Sphinx and just it's like a road trip catalogue of photographs. I've got a British bomber pilot's photo album, similarly like that. Like these Second World War dudes were serious people. And they took photographs of the most amazing things while they were in the Second World War, and it looked like it was just a road trip. They didn't take photographs of burnt out Well, my grandfather, there were burnt out Panzers in a couple of photos. There were Spitfires in a couple of photos. There were a few Lee Enfields in a couple of photos. But most of them were kids playing in ponds, just like regular people doing regular stuff through the Second World War.
I get that. My father and my four uncles were all enlisted in the Second World War. My father was overseas, as were my uncles. Yeah. My Uncle Walter was the only one killed in the liberation of a town of Hoevelaken, where they have their town square is dedicated to him. I mean, my mother was in the RAF, so I get the whole Second World War thing.
Oh yeah.
But I got a more important question for you. Do you remember back in the old days where, Johnny Carson had his regular sidekick, Ed McMahon?
Yeah.
Do you ever remember seeing Ed McMahon like on the Merv Griffin show or the Mike Douglas show?
No, that's kind of interesting, actually. I watched those because I love the old comedians, particularly the old Jewish comedians.
Right.
And so I watched all those. Literally, I went through, before my daughters were born, what's the guy's name? Oh, what's the guy's name?
But Merv Griffin had a regular sidekick. I forget what his name was. It was an older fella. But these regular sidekicks, it was kind of an unwritten rule that you would never, pilfer the guy's sidekick and have him come on your show.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about Bruce appearing on Model Rail Radio?
Oh, did he?
Yeah, no, I love talking with Bruce Wilson. I love talking with Bruce Kelly, and it's really good to see him on the show.
It wouldn't be that he was on the show 210, February 12th, 2022.
Somebody's scrolling through the
website. Look, Bruce and I are both really. This whole thing is really stupid currently, because if you know this much about the Second World War, it puts you in like 0.3% of the population. If you know a little bit about the First World War, it puts you in 0.3% of the population. Bruce Wilson and I could just jam on the First World War on Model Rail Radio.
It is a fascinating subject.
Oh my goodness. I have this picture painted by a German guy of the Somme, because he was at the Somme. And in the Second World War, he painted pictures of the Somme. Let me tell you about this guy. His name is Wilhelm.
Aren't you kind of trying to dodge the question?
What? That I ripped off Bruce and we talked about
you're pilfering my co-host and brought him on your show.
Oh my goodness! He volunteered.
What did you pay him? Like scale or something? Why does it take you so long to edit a show?
Oh, this is a current problem.
It is. We had this discussion on the last time you were on, and I'm like, it takes me like an hour and a half, and it takes you a month. It takes you a month and a half.
This goes back to Bio to Live. Bio to Live, we had a whole bunch of folks where English was not their first language; it was typically their fourth or fifth language. And I find it really important to edit podcasts. And look, this puts me again in the 0.3% of podcasters. And I feel that you need to have a standard, and I need to be in the right mind frame to edit a Model Rail Radio, particularly ones with a variety of folk who I won't even name on this podcast. But, my view is not Bruce Wilson. But there are people. No, I'm not even naming any names. I'm not naming any names. There are people that take a little bit extra editing. And quite frankly, they appear on my podcast because I do the editing. These people that want to talk about the presidents and their wives and all this other stuff, they're easy to edit. I mean, there are a bunch of people that come on Model Rail Radio and think that this is just a platform for their particular leanings, and some of those people I almost completely... Well, I gave the example of the professor on Show 200. I mean, there are people that will appear and will say things, and I'm just like, oh, you're just adding 6 hours to my life now. Why are you doing this nonsense? I mean, no. And I continue to do it because that's what Model Rail Radio is about. It's about a quality that I want to maintain. Line.
Yeah, so are you saying because I can edit mine faster, there's no quality?
No, not at all. That's not
That
what I'm saying.
sounds like what you just said.
Lionel, let's take offense.
Because I said, why does it take you so long? You said you want quality.
No, I want a particular format, and unfortunately, that takes me a little bit longer. And I need to be in the right mindset to listen.
Andy's having everybody call in raw, and that is probably a lot more effort to pare down.
Oh, noisy. When I used to do bio, you'll love this story, Lionel. And this is a great one for an end of an AML podcast. When I used to record bios live,
apparently, get ready, Bruce. We're coming to the end.
Okay, I've got my script.
Hey, look, it's 9:00. I'm about to start yawning. Okay, I've been awake for literally 17 hours. Okay, so on Bio to Live, we had this guy who used to call in and smoke weed continuously.
we had one of those.
Continuously, and he would cough really loudly. And every time he'd call, and then he invited his buddies on, and guess what? They were all smoking weed, but none of them had headphones, so they were echoing back and all this other stuff. And I'm like, and I still put those podcasts out. I still edited them. When I did the first recording of the NMRA, this is literally Clark Kooning, 2012, 2011.
Right. Yep.
They were recording under air conditioning in some hotel in Las Vegas, which is the way the NMRA used to meet. Look, I can't even get my acronyms right. It's getting that late, folks. So I had to do so much editing on that podcast, the NMRA board. And the NMRA board was basically saying F you, quite literally. Like, it's well worth going back and listening to that, because I asked them about not even open LCB. I asked them why they were using CAN buses still in 2012. Like, CAN bus was what came before JMRI. And literally it was because, like, a couple of the board liked CAN buses. Like, I'd use CAN buses. If model railroading was based on CAN buses, it's a processor architecture networking stack thing. No one would be doing model railroading anymore. Anyway, that was the big thing that they were pushing at the time. Go back and anyone interested, go back and listen. It's in the Model Rail Radio feed. When I interviewed the NMRA board, 2012, Clark Kooning, I can't say a better thing about that man. Great gentleman. Going to have sushi with him. He's moving close to me in the near future. I know you've had issues with Clark, but
Have I?
Historically, perhaps. And anyway, my view is
he did call up one of the manufacturers who had put AML stickers on their packages and told them that if they ever did that again, he'd never order from them.
Well, he'd already done a bunch of stuff with that manufacturer. So didn't that manufacturer? Well, anyway, let's move on from this. Anyway,
so Clark is moving near you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, he's snow goosing it, as they say.
He's going to be snowbird.
Snowbird.
Snow goose.
Well, the snow goose swoops everywhere, so that's what I'm thinking, right?
Did you tell him there's no lakes there for him to fish in?
Well, there's just a whole lot of bodies in the lake near Vegas, but let's move on.
Well, in barrels.
In barrels.
No, they couldn't afford barrels back in the 50s, apparently.
I don't have a problem with Clark Kooning. It just so happens we didn't see eye to eye when 35 years ago, when my wife wanted to be part of the NMRA and she was the vice president of the local region. He didn't like the way she was handling membership, so he got him and 2 or 3 other of the executive and got her kicked out of the. So other than that, him and I are fine.
Very good, Lionel.
Other than that, I don't see a problem.
Anyway, so I like editing my shows, and I'm sorry, and it takes me too long. And look, quite frankly, the Craig Biscar show might take a month for me to edit.
Well, how can it possibly take you a month to edit an hour-and-a-half show?
Because I need to be in exactly the right mindset. And if, like, for example, tonight, I couldn't be editing a Model Rail Radio tonight. Maybe tomorrow, maybe by Friday, I'd be editing a Model Rail Radio. But I've got to be in the right mindset. And
do you not like listening to your own show?
It's not that. It's that.
I was listening to one I did about rail fanning with Uncle Dave and Roger Coleman and Chris Wayman, and I'm driving around today and I'm enjoying listening to it because it was a good show. So are your shows not that good or something?
Look, you live a life, Lionel, and I wish I could live parts of your life. I don't wish I could live other parts of your life, but you are an inspiration to me, and I can't argue with anything that you're saying. I should be able to edit my shows faster do we need to continue with this subject, or I can just
fade
on into the distance?
I just like to give you a hard time. That's all.
Well, I'd like to know how you started the podcast.
What's that?
I'd like to know why you started the podcast.
I want to. Yeah, we're still trying to figure out why you started the podcast.
My grandparents were great people, and they inspired me to talk, and inspired me that there were men of a particular generation, of a particular age, that didn't have social network means around them, and that I was looking to start a podcast, and like, why are there only 2 wargaming podcasts? Let's talk about wargaming, miniature wargaming. There were like
let's not
16 to 18 of those podcasts. Literally, the what are they called here? The tax people, the tax collecting people.
IRA.
Philatellus?
IRS.
The IRS raided one of the wargaming podcasts houses because he wasn't paying his tax properly. I mean, on the podcast, he had so many people that the IRS thought he was dodging tax technically. But anyway, they raided it. A manufacturer ended up buying that podcast. So this was all happening at the same time I started Model Rail Radio, and I was like, firstly, I got a lot of dung thrown at me early on by even doing a Model Rail podcast, probably as a foreigner, probably as a free podcast, probably because everyone was following your model, Lionel, because they were on Libsyn, and looking for sponsorship and looking for people to pay for the podcast. And I wasn't doing that. Because I'd done Biota Live. I was just interested in doing free call-in internet radio on TalkShoe at the time. And I got a lot of dung thrown at me early on because I was seen as being competition. I never think about podcasting in any way as competition. You might occasionally joke with me about that. But quite frankly, my view is that there are so many good possible podcasts out there that we just need to encourage everyone to make better podcasts.
See, and I disagree with that because I think if you water down the product too much.
That's possible. I agree in part now, as I'm an old curmudgeon. But my view is that in general, if you listen and refine, and you've listened and refined, you've worked out your format, you've got on 1, 2, 3 really good co-hosts. I mean, you've worked out this thing to your format, and you've run with it, and you've enjoyed it. You've created a community. People love wearing your stuff. They love going to your barbecues. You've made it, Lionel.
Well, that's because I edit mine a lot faster.
Yeah, I know. And you're not an old curmudgeon that falls over in hospitals.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, like episode 202 was on March 27th, 2021, and then there wasn't another one until September of that year.
You know what happened? I started doing weekly podcasts through COVID, which I did do. And there was a bunch of them. Thanks. You've got the guy, what's the guy's name? Tom Roberts? Or is it It's Robert Thomas. Look, this is how late it's getting. Robert Thomas. He's part of the AML Network. Have you had him on?
I know, but he's on the list.
He's edited a bunch of Model Rail radios for me.
Oh, did he?
Well, he's a salt of the earth guy. He's
probably did
fascinating.
them faster.
He probably did them faster, didn't he?
He did. Look. Robert Thomas edited out stuff. Like literally, he realized there's no reason to be talking about Joe Biden's wife in a podcast. Let's just put that out there.
We're not a model railroad podcast.
She's not a model roader then.
Yeah. Exactly. There's no reason to be talking about, and that he edited out stuff where I used to think, people actually vote for these people. I probably should. No, get the hell out of here with this audio that I have to edit. Anyway.
Well, why don't you just tell the people at the time we're not talking about that?
Oh my goodness!
My wife,
literally, my wife. When I didn't even talk trash about this person. I just made a point of saying that I waited in a restaurant for this person to turn up for an extended period of time at the narrow gauge convention. There's a theme here, and this person didn't turn up. He knows who he is. He's listening to this podcast now. I know it. I called him out in the podcast, and I played it to my wife because literally my wife was in the restaurant with me waiting for this gentleman to turn up. And she's just like, why do you do it to yourself? Why do you she did this tonight. Literally, I'm going to have a conversation with my wife having gotten off this recording. Oh, I spent the evening with my daughters and literally got them to bed slightly early so I could be on this recording.
So she's going to say, why do you do this to yourself when you're off this podcast?
Yeah.
She doesn't like this podcast?
No, not this podcast specifically. She thinks, look, the Craig Biscay situation
Right.
hit my wife hard. And the nature of the Craig Biscay situation and the nature of everything that led into it, like literally, I really, really, really enjoy communicating with people off the podcast as well as on the podcast. But the Craig Biscay thing was horrible, and I really didn't feel that I needed to be quite as heavily in the loop as I was. And I felt a responsibility to Karen, because Karen is just an amazing woman. And I felt a responsibility to the whole thing, but my wife felt it very hard. Let's just say.
Well, that's like me with Boston Joe. I was texting with him when he passed away.
I know.
But it happens. The thing is, you got to go forward. You got to make
without question.
You got to move. You got to take what life you have and make something out of it, so that you do it in honor of in honor of those that went on before us. You gotta look for the positives, not the negatives.
Part of that for the both of you, and I can say this because I don't have a podcast, but for the both of you, you've created these communities that have become really very, very profoundly important to people.
It's difficult to explain to someone, and literally, like my brother is a good example of this. When my grandfather and my wife's grandmother passed away, because my wife's grandmother, in not particularly good circumstances with trains, go back and listen to.
She got hit by a train, right? Yeah.
She got hit by a train. Yeah, literally. Model Railroad at that.
Oh, I got it.
Had the locomotive in its, review section that killed her.
What?
Yeah, great timing. Literally, the same locomotive that killed her was in Model Railroad magazine that month.
The
model of it.
BNSF. Never going to model it, unfortunately, but yes.
Wow.
Yeah, I think
exactly the locomotive.
I think you take things too hard.
Clearly.
I think you gotta kind of ease up and just kind of enjoy life.
That's what the hospital orderly said to me after they finished laughing. Like I shouldn't be upset that they're laughing at my demand.
Who would you say in the last 2 or 3 years? Who is your main guest, the number one guest you rely on to help you be on the show?
Oh, look, Bruce Wilson was just like literally having Bruce Wilson on. I'm not joking. And if Bruce Kelly ever calls back, literally Bruce Kelly as well. Look, Chris is a pretty good caller. So
is Bruce Wilson your main guy then?
I just like jamming.
I call him every 5 years or so.
Exactly. And it makes my 5 years.
So that's your main guy. That's the guy you rely on.
Tom, the problem I have with your podcast is for some reason I never get any announcements on Facebook for it. I have to sort of go scrolling around and find the Model Rail Radio page, and then
I can tell you the problem with
they don't send me the notices.
Facebook doesn't anymore.
I can tell you the problem with this podcast. You're on it.
No, look, seriously, there are a number of callers that I just really enjoy talking to. The guys in Kent, I mean, seriously, I went to Kent. I've been to Kent 3 times in a 2-year period. And since COVID, I haven't gone back because they're all COVID. You don't want to be taking COVID to these kind of fellas. I mean, like, literally, there are so many people on Model Rail Radio that I just love talking to, and that's the podcast.
All right. Well, I think we're out of network time.
Amen.
How do you think this went?
It went pretty well. I'm pretty sure I'm going to get those emails from people like, I won't say what the people used to say to me because they've never been AML Network folks, but I'm going to get a lot of emails from this one.
Are you?
I think so.
And will they know where to mail it to?
Oh, yeah. They'll hit me up on Facebook. We're already probably Facebook friends.
Oh, okay. Are you going to email them, Chris?
Oh, I'll email them, yeah.
Okay.
When the YouTube video goes live of me falling over, if I find it, which I probably will,
you got to post it.
Let you all know. It's going on my Facebook feed. Yeah.
So you know we got to.
You
know what we got to do is we got to work out our broadcasting schedule so that I don't interfere with your schedule, so that Bruce can be on whenever you need him.
No, look, the ability to talk to Bruce Wilson every 5 years. And Chris, I don't know how many times you call in, like 4 times? Chris is really a regular. And Mr. Kelly,
yeah, he's a regular. He's a regular, all right.
Yeah, irregular is the right word.
Yeah.
Okay.
My problem, Tom, is that when you do your podcast, it's a Saturday afternoon, and I'm usually at the park doing the birthday party.
He's usually at the park taking over another section of the.
or yelling at people for going 6.5 miles an hour.
Exactly. Yeah. Tom, be careful having Kelly on. He has a problem dealing with people. He's either taking over the club.
Well, he's the one my wife asks after.
Oh, is it? Did she ever ask about me?
You've never met my wife, but Bruce Kelly made a really strong. Like Bruce Kelly, basically, show 100. He helped out so much. Like he was maybe in slight contrast to Jim Lincoln, who overstayed.
Why is your wife going to be unhappy that you were on this podcast? Are you going to say? Are you going to say?
Now I have daughters, my time and my energy, and I'm a negligent father before anything else.
So doesn't she do anything? What is it with? What is this new generation where the men are more responsible than the women? What is that all about?
I have nothing to say on this topic. I have nothing to say.
He's going to get more. He's going to get more email.
He's pleading the fifth. He's pleading the fifth.
The head injury.
Yeah.
This is a great recording, Lionel. I'm really looking forward to listening to this one when it comes out.
Well, it's going to take me like a month. I'll have to be in the right mood to edit it.
Oh my goodness, my wife is going to be.
Have another arrow bar.
Why is your wife going to be upset? Do you say nasty things about me or something?
Not at all. I think podcasting is just one of those things that just doesn't make sense to a majority of the world.
And
it's embarrassing to tell people. I mean, certain people, I would never talk about being a podcaster. I always tell my managers at work, just because it explains why I know half a dozen people at Apple, which is a company that I work with quite closely. And, like all the strange relationships I have with people, like Terry Terrence and Jim Gore, like these are amazing men. These are amazing men to know, as you say, with regards to the what Terry used to do. But just his voice alone commands respect, right?
So you're embarrassed to tell people you have a podcast?
It's a bit. The problem is contemporary podcasters. You said it. I'm going to say it as well. I have friends that I work with that are 10 years younger than me that claim to be podcasters. They are actually podcasters.
Influencers.
But, yeah, it gets it like literally. And quite frankly, the folks that are influencers don't understand podcasts.
Right.
Like we are seen as being niche anyway, and Apple hasn't helped. A bunch of I shouldn't say that out loud, but a bunch of companies and a bunch of people that made. Do you remember the Curry guy who was on MTV who made 25 million? What was his name? Stephen Curry? No. What was his name?
What's wrong with being a podcaster?
Well, there were a bunch of people that sold out heavily early on. Right. And what's the fellow's name? You know the guy I'm talking about.
I have no idea what you're talking about. And as a matter of fact, just so we're clear, I really haven't had much of an idea what you've been talking about the entire time. So
that's why you had me on, right?
And now you're telling me that your wife's Curry.
Adam Curry's the man.
And now you're telling me your wife's going to be mad at you.
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think I thought very heavily, particularly through COVID, but also recently, about what I do with these podcasts, because I still do a few podcasts. I've got like a wargaming podcast, speaking of wargaming podcasts. So, I mean, I've got podcasts. I've got a podcast literally, which I did a simulcast on about falling over in hospital. Not about falling over in hospital, but I mentioned that in the podcast. So, I mean, I've been doing podcasts since 2006. I don't think, like literally people would, I complain about people not visiting me in Las Vegas. I think if I ever stopped Model Rail Radio, people would track me down. I think I've said that in a previous podcast with you, Lon. Yes, it's Chris. Yeah, I'd track you down. I'd screw you up royally.
You get tracked down. Yeah,
I'd be tracked down. Okay.
Right after I send you an email.
Very good. Anyway, this is why my wife is going to give me a hard time.
Because I'm still not clear. Because you were on this podcast?
No,
because he was hanging out with that Strang boy again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I won't tell you what my wife calls you, Lionel. But anyway, we'll move on from that.
I'm very confused. Anyways, Kelly, can you give out our email address?
Yes, if you want to reach us through the wonders of email, you can reach us through ModelersLife @gmail.com. That's modeler with one L like Barbalet, not two L's like Lionel.
I like that. That was good.
You must have thought of that before.
Yeah.
No,
He's been working on
in between laughing, I came up with
it. Did you find that video on YouTube? You must have found that video on YouTube. That's all I have to say.
What video?
With me falling over in the hospital.
No.
Not yet.
Very good.
No.
We'll find it. It will be found.
We are going to track it down.
Are you really sure it's on YouTube?
I'm almost. If there's an influencer in the hospital, it will be on YouTube.
Have you seen it? No, you haven't seen it. You can't say that stuff unless you've seen it.
On YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you didn't catch the email address, if you go to our website and you click on the picture of the moderately agitated mailboy in a particularly agitated state, you'll be able to, all you got to do is just click on that picture and the email address will already be filled out. And then all you do is put in the subject line in your text and boom, you can send us an email.
Hey, how do they find our website, Lionel?
Well, if you go to ModelersLife.com, so that's the full show name, ModelersLife.com, you'll find all sorts of things about the podcast. Now, this will be on the free channel because I think the world should hear from Tom Barbalet.
Oh, absolutely. Man.
This is episode show 200. I don't know if anybody will ever listen to us again after this, but
they got a YouTube of Tom here. He's the Model Rail Radio's ringmaster.
Oh, okay.
There you
go. So anyways, but if you want to have twice as much podcasting every week, these free shows come out on every Monday. But if you'd like twice as much podcasting every week for just 365 payments of 16 cents a day, you can double your pleasure every week and join our Patreon channel. And there's a link on the website for that. Tom, I got a question for you.
Certainly.
Have you ever wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it?
Well, that's interesting. I've started printing a bunch of my old T-shirts that I put out 15. We talked about the comedian, I think, in the last show.
The comedian?
Yeah.
Jim Gaffigan, who was going to sue you?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Or no, you were going to sue Jim Gaffigan.
I wasn't going to ever do that. I would never even say the gentleman's name. Quite frankly, he did a bunch of stuff, anyway, he expunged a bunch of my work.
He sponged a bunch of your work, Jim Gaffigan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
No, but we're not saying the name. Got it.
We're not saying that. Anyway, how do we get to this topic?
I asked you if you wanted a T-shirt with a hot dog on it.
Oh, no, I've started creating a whole lot of the old T-shirts that have the old logos and stuff that Jim Gaffigan decided to put out a comedy about, which wasn't really that funny. I never really liked any of his jokes, quite frankly. But anyway, so I put out a bunch of old T-shirts. I would possibly... My daughters wear T-shirts with hot dog stains on them. Is that close?
Sure. You're going to be okay, Chris? You're going to be all right?
Sorry, it should be on mute.
That's why you had me on, right? Very good.
So is that a yes or a no?
I don't know how I actually quite like hot dogs. I think I'm without the bun currently because that's the way I've gotten to where I am. But yeah, I'd probably wear a T-shirt with a hot dog on it. Why not? Okay. Yeah, let's say yes. Let me lean heavily into yes.
Okay. Well, if you ever want a T-shirt with a hot dog on it, if you go to Midwest Model Railroad and they're a store in Independence, Missouri, and it's owned by Stephen Atwell and his dad Gary, run by the family. And it's a 15,000 square foot model railroad store. It is like walking through a real life Walther's catalog.
Wow.
Yeah.
What's the place in Chicago that's like that? But it's not as big. But they have everything in the Chicago.
I think that's Walmart.
No. They do SN3. You can see SN3 there. What is it called?
You can see what?
Displays Hobbies there.
Right, yeah. So
Displays Hobbies, from my perspective, because they even have wargaming stuff in there. I mean, that's how hardcore they were. I'm sure that this gentleman who you mentioned has an amazing store, without question.
Well, Midwest Model Railroad does have a gaming section as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you go to their website and the URL is midwestmodelrr.com, and you click and you go
they
across.
have 2-rail low scale stuff. I'm going to be buying.
Absolutely,
they do.
absolutely. I would buy it from them. I'm there. So and you scroll across the navigation bar and click on the AML tab. Mm-hmm. You will be brought into a wonderland of AML merchandise. Ooh. Hats, hoodies, T-shirts, mugs, and in there you'll find
toddler wear, because I'm looking for toddler wear.
Absolutely, we have toddler wear, and if you go in there, you'll find a T-shirt with a hot dog.
It's size XXL, but it's toddler wear.
My wife would love that. I'm going to buy a bunch of toddler wear there and a bunch of O-scale 2-rail turnouts. That's what I'm in the market for.
Yeah, don't tell her you were on this podcast because she's going to be mad. Is it me that she doesn't like, or?
She's met the professor, and actually she's broken bread with the professor, and quite frankly, the professor has come out to meet me and my wife in the most strange, extreme circumstances in Sydney, Australia. So unfortunately, in the Professor Lionel Strang feud, she's Team Professor Lionel.
Okay. Okay, that's good. I'm glad.
After the professor talked a bunch of smack on Show 200, and I said, he's probably not calling back in the foreseeable future. She's still like, no, I'm Team Professor.
Okay, well, hopefully someday I'll be able to win her over.
I think this episode should. Let me put that up.
Yeah, I don't think you should let her listen to it.
Believe me, head injuries abound. Yeah.
and that's it. So now, I don't think on the last show, I guess on this show, yeah, it's the same thing, yeah. So at the appropriate moment, we need you to say happy rails to you.
Okay.
Now, I think
that was difficult in the last one. Let me see if I can do it this one.
And I think this is important for you. Since the last time you were on, we've kind of come up with this little preamble. It's happy rails to you. There's no interpretation. There's no dancing. There's no singing. It's just simply happy rails to you with enthusiasm.
Okay, let me try that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Happy rails to you.
Yeah, not yet.
Okay, very good.
So are you ready? Okay.
I'm ready.
Well, Tom, as we close the barn doors on another episode of A Modeler's Life, and the sun slowly sets over the back 40, I guess there's nothing else left to do except for you to say...
Happy rails to you.
While in Busted Knuckle, guests of A Modeler's Life podcast stay at the Casa del Sol Motor Court and Inn, where late-night dancing at the Rumba Room is a magical event to be experienced.
It's another Lincoln Homer.
I'm exhausted.
Yes.